few days ago, on September 5th, a settlement was reached between all parties in the class action lawsuit by a group of authors against Anthropic AI. The short of it is this. Pending the judge's approval, Anthropic has agreed to settle the case to the tune of $1.5 billion that will eventually be paid out less legal and administration plus expenses to the copyright holders, which could mean payouts to authors. This is a huge development in the writing and AI field, so I wanted to spend this video talking about the case, the settlement, what it could mean for authors, and what you can do to prepare. I will say now that the judge, just yesterday, withheld his approval for the agreed-upon settlement because he found the structure around the deal to be insufficient to protect both the plaintiffs and Anthropic. The judge has set up additional hearings to hear more about the set of books in question and more detail on how the payouts will be administered. We'll talk about that and a ton more, so stick around. Hey, if you're new to the channel, I'm Brad Bollier, and I'm a full-time fantasy and science fiction author with a dozen novels, tons of short stories, and 20-plus years of experience in the field of writing. I started a novel approach to share hard-earned lessons on writing, editing, publishing, and the business of writing, so hopefully you don't have to go through the same pain I did. If that sounds up your alley, be sure to subscribe, and if you find this video useful, I hope you'll like, share, and maybe even buy me a coffee on ko-fi.com. Link in the description below. So let's start with this. What is Anthropic AI? Anthropic created Claude, which is a powerful and popular AI chatbot competing in the same space as ChatGPT, Google Gemini, Microsoft Copilot, Perplexity, and a ton more. I have used those different AIs just to get a feel for what they're like. I have used Claude recently to help me with my video edits, actually. It's able to take in programmatic instructions and cut out bad takes. So if I'm stuttering or I have to collect my thoughts, I can repeat things. And I have this structure that helps me tell Claude how to identify those so I can weed them out and cut my videos faster. Like many, perhaps all of the chatbots out there, Claude can create written content based on prompts. But it doesn't create that content out of whole cloth. It's a language model, a large language model that had to be trained. How is it trained? In part by Anthropic feeding it copyrighted material, including fiction and nonfiction books. So what did the plaintiffs claim in this lawsuit? 3 authors, thriller novelist Andrea Bartz, and nonfiction writers Charles Graeber and Kirk Wallace Johnson sued last year and now represent a broader group of writers and publishers whose books Anthropic downloaded or scanned to train the large language model used by its AI Claude. They claimed Anthropic relied in part on books pirated from shadow libraries, Library Genesis or LibGen, and pirate library Mirror. The plaintiffs argued that both scanning and taking pirated copies of copyrighted material is illegal and that the copyright holders were due compensation. Anthropic, meanwhile, argued that their AI training was shielded by the fair use doctrine, which allows unauthorized use of copyrighted works under certain conditions. So what happened with the lawsuit? The judge, Judge Alsup, dealt the case a mixed ruling in June of this year, 2025, finding that training AI chatbots on copyrighted books wasn't illegal, but that Anthropic wrongfully acquired millions of books through pirated websites. After that, the AI industry, including Anthropic, largely praised Alsup's ruling because he found that training AI systems on copyrighted works, so chatbots can produce their own passages of text, qualified as fair use under US copyright law because it was quintessentially transformative. That's a legal term and I don't understand all the implications, but it essentially shields Anthropic and other companies like Google, who has done a similar thing by buying and scanning books, if the purpose is meant to be vastly different from the original material. Comparing the AI model to any reader aspiring to be a writer, Alsup wrote that Anthropic trained upon works not to race ahead and replicate or supplant them, but to turn a hard corner and create something different. Yeah, I don't know if I agree with that or not. Maybe that was not their intent. I can't say. But I think some of these technological advances, AI specifically, are moving forward without a lot of concern about the people that are being affected by it, and maybe the businesses, small businesses, writers, creative endeavors that will be affected by that technology. Be that as it may, my opinion doesn't matter. That's what Alsup wrote. Alsup also ruled that Anthropic, in downloading pirated copies, had paid nothing and kept the copies even after deciding it wouldn't use them to train its AI. Alsup's June ruling found that Anthropic had downloaded books it knew had been pirated. It started with nearly 200,000 from an online library called Books3, and that was assembled by AI researchers outside of OpenAI to match the vast collection on which ChatGPT was being trained. Debut thriller novel The Lost Night by Bartz, a lead plaintiff in the case that I mentioned earlier, was among those books found in the Books3 dataset. Anthropic later took at least 5 million copies from the pirate website Library Genesis, or LibGen, and at least 2 million more copies from the pirate library Mirror. Alsup wrote in his summary judgment, Anthropic downloaded over 7 million pirated copies of books, paid nothing, and kept these pirated copies in its library even after deciding it would not use them to train its AI. Authors argue Anthropic should have paid for those pirated copies. This order agrees. So rather than go to trial, Anthropic decided to settle the case. Assuming the settlement is approved, and that's not a given at this point, what are the terms? Anthropic agreed to settle for at least $1.5 billion an estimated $3,000 per work. Anthropic Deputy General Counsel Aparna Sridhar said in a statement, "Today's settlement, if approved, will resolve the plaintiff's remaining legacy claims. We remain committed to developing safe AI systems that help people and organizations extend their capabilities, advance scientific discovery, and solve complex problems." I will note at this point that even though I am an author and on one side of this case in one respect, I do want them to treat copyrighted material as it should be treated and not abuse the fair use doctrine. AI is more than just that. It is not all bad. It does have benefits and will help in a number of ways to advance science, chemistry, energy, and other fields. So it's not all bad, certainly, and I'm not trying to make it that way. But I do want, as an author, for the companies to treat works that helped them get to where they are and where they're headed with more respect and give the compensation that I think we should be due. That said, note the at least $1.5 billion I mentioned a moment ago. Well, why could it be more? That's because the final list of books is still being compiled. And there's a new wrinkle. A hearing was held September 8th, just yesterday as of the taping of this video, in which the judge withheld his approval and scheduled another hearing, or maybe multiple hearings. Why? Alsup's main concern centered on how the claims process will be handled in an effort to ensure everyone eligible knows about it so the authors don't get the shaft, in his words. He's set a September 22nd deadline for submitting a claims form for him to review before the September 25th hearing to review the settlement again. So we'll know more by the end of this month. The judge also raised worries about two big groups connected to the case: the Authors Guild, in addition to the Association of American Publishers, working behind the scenes in ways that could pressure some authors to accept the settlement without fully understanding it. I'll touch on those two groups again in a second, but they are part of an author-publisher working group, an APWG, that is part of this whole settlement. And it's a way for authors to be talking to publishers to iron out some of these details. So I don't think that's bad necessarily, but I think maybe he doesn't understand it, or he's claiming they're not fully involved and not part of the lawsuit, and yet they're going to have some control or sway over what happens, and so he's concerned. The judge also said he needed more ironclad assurances that the number of claims won't swell to ensure Anthropic doesn't get blindsided by more lawsuits coming out of the woodwork. Alsup made it clear that he was leery about the settlement and warned he may decide to let the case go to trial. So, assuming the settlement is approved, what does it mean for authors? It means that if one of your works was downloaded by Anthropic from those pirate websites, you may be entitled to $3,000 per work. Always keep in mind that that figure is going to be reduced based on legal fees and administrative fees and expenses. So We don't know right now what that number is going to turn out to be. That'll change in the end. But there are some wrinkles here. First off, you may not be the copyright holder. Your publisher may be. So what happens then? I have not found a definitive answer yet, and I don't think there is a definitive answer yet. But my guess is this. The settlement will be treated as any other income and will be paid to the author by the publisher based on the terms of your contract. In other words, the publisher is going to get that money because this was an ebook that was downloaded by Anthropic. And so that means you'll likely get whatever royalties are stipulated for ebook sales in each individual work's contract. Now, you may have one contract that binds together several works. You may have bucket accounting. You may have different rules for how advances are paid. So this could actually change per book, per author. It's not going to be the same for everybody. And so you may get more or less depending on if the advance for that book has been paid off or not. And there's plenty of other considerations that may affect how that goes, the split between the publisher and the author. And so to address this, Anthropic in its motion explains that Class Counsel has assembled an author-publisher working group, that APWG I mentioned, to provide advice and proposals for how to efficiently address intra-work distributions that may arise during the claims administration process, including the formulation of a claims form that provides any information necessary to address intra-work allocation, adjustments to the proposed form of notice, and process and procedures designed to minimize the administrative burden of claims administration. That was a mouthful. I believe that intra-work term is talking about how things are split beyond the publisher themselves. There may be several authors involved. There may be an estate involved. There may also be agents, and likely will be agents involved. So how is that handled? It's a gnarly problem to solve. And so that APWG, that group, is meant to work that out between authors and publishers to iron this stuff out before it comes to a head and people start scratching and clawing and complaining that things aren't fair. Everybody is treated fairly. I mean, the publishers, I believe, are certainly going to be owed money. So are agents probably, and certainly authors, and whoever has inherited those works if it's part of an estate and passed down to other people. A group known as the Authors Alliance says, we don't really know who is in this group except that it will be led by two industry experts, Authors Guild CEO Mary Rassenberger and Association of American Publishers CEO Maria Palante, and will also be supervised by the Honorable Lane R. Phillips, a retired judge. The Authors Alliance article goes on to say, given what I suspect is the makeup of the works list and class, including many nonfiction scholarly works, I really hope it also includes some representatives who can speak for the likely large number of authors and publishers who are not well represented or aligned with the Authors Guild or AAP. And I will second that. I hope that happens as well. I really hope that they are able to create some kind of structure around this that makes things as smooth as possible for everybody and gets people the money that they're due. The second big wrinkle in this whole thing is that this settlement likely only applies to those who have been copyrighted in the US by you or your publisher within a certain time frame, and which was registered with the United States Copyright Office before being downloaded by Anthropic or within 3 months of publication. So that was super confusing to me. I had to read that a dozen times, and there in the article that I found, it does have a bit of an explainer. I'm still not sure I totally understand. In essence, they're trying to consider works that have been copyrighted because this legal battle is being fought under US copyright law, and so the works that are protected must be copyrighted by that office. They must have been registered and copyrighted. And so, in short, the book should be registered within 3 months of its first publication in any format, or before the titles were downloaded, because the Copyright Act provides statutory court-set damages only if one of those two things is true, and registered within 5 years of first publication, because the Copyright Act provides a presumption of validity of all the facts in the registration certificate, such as an author and owner for works registered within 5 years. Tons of legalese kind of wrapped up in that. I don't know that you need to diagnose that too heavily right now. I will talk about in a little bit how you can enter your information as a potential claim outside of your publisher. Your publisher may do it on their own, but you can do it by yourself as well. And so I'll show you that in a little bit. So publishers as well as authors are included in the class of those who can recover. In his class certification order, Judge Alsup included in the class all beneficial or legal copyright owners of the exclusive right to reproduce copies of any book in the versions of LibGen or Pirate Library Mirror downloaded by Anthropic. Essentially, if your books were copyrighted before LibGen or Pirate Library Mirror downloaded them back in 2021 and 2022, respectively, you're involved in this case and you may get money in the end. For books where the author has granted a publisher an exclusive right to publish the book, the publisher is the legal owner and the author is the beneficial owner under copyright law. However, if the book has gone out of print and the rights have reverted to the author becomes the sole and legal owner. So you'll have to consider that as well. Do you have books that might be caught up in this that have reverted to you through some out-of-print clause? And so what is the Authors Guild role in all of this? The Authors Guild is not a party to the suit. It was consulted with other stakeholders in connection with the settlement. The Authors Guild has been proposed to serve as an author expert in allocation discussions included in that APWG we talked about earlier. So what's next? Well, first of all, we have those judges' meetings that are coming up. This settlement has not been approved yet. Assuming that it has, what's going to happen? The plaintiffs, with input from Anthropic, will continue to finalize the list of works and will deliver it to the court by October 10th. So about a month from now. And from that list, the settlement administrator will create a searchable database where authors and others can search for their works. And so sometime after October 10th, a searchable online tool will be created that people can look for their works in that are definitely part of this class action suit. And so I'll be keeping an eye on this. Subscribe to the channel if you want to learn more about it and be notified, and I'll include links when that comes around. The notice administrator is expected to send notice in the fall. The official notice will instruct class members how to file a claim and provide other information about their choices. My suspicion is a good number of authors who have been traditionally published, the publisher will take care of a lot of that for you. They'll be getting monies, probably sending it out to agents and then to authors. That's just my best guess at this point. The Authors Guild, many literary agencies, and other organizations have been working to get the word out. If you believe Anthropic may have downloaded books from LibGen or Pirate Library Mirror, you can visit a website, which I'll include down below, and I will show you right now. So this is the legal website for this case. This is Bartz et al. Versus Anthropic PBC. And so this describes very lightly what this case is about. You can read over that, but the important part for you is to look at this submit contact information, which takes you to the same place as this other link over here. So you can click on either and it will bring you to the contact page. Again, you can look at this over in more detail, but if you click at the bottom here, author and publisher contact information form, this is not the final form that will be used by the court or dictated by the court. This is an early list that the legal team is collecting to help move things along. And so even though I have looked up my books and I believe my publisher DAW Books and Tor.com will have the legal rights and probably be getting any settlement money, I filled it out anyway. And so all you do is fill out your author first name, your last name, and then more contact information down below. But the important part is this adding books. So you can put in your title of work, the ISBN that you can get from different websites or your own records, and then the publisher. If they are your own books, you may have a DBA or an LLC, in which case you would put that. And then do it for every single book that you think might apply. You can just click on this add another book and it creates a new entry. So I just did that for all of the ones that I found in the US copyright searchable database. And so let me show you that next. So I'll have the link down below, but this is publicrecords.copyright.gov and it has this search field. So I'm just going to put my name in and then I'll hit search. And it comes up with the list of books that have been copyrighted. And very likely this was in the set of books that was downloaded by Anthropic in that time frame. I don't pay much attention to pirate sites and who pirates me. I assume my publisher is on top of that as much as they can be, but I have looked at these over the years now and again, and I know that my books have been up there for a long time, very shortly after publication. And so probably everything that I published up until 2021 and 2022, I think June of 2022 would have been the final date, were out there and available and were probably taken by Anthropic. So I just added them all to that list, that contact page that the legal team set up. The court will hold a final approval hearing after any comments or objections are received and will then determine whether to grant the settlement final approval. The court will also determine what fees the attorneys are entitled to. In my mind, I always think lawyers are entitled to 1/3 from all kinds of movies, but I don't know what that'll turn out to be in the end. Once the settlement is finally approved and any appeals are completed, the settlement administrator will start sending the initial tranche of the settlement fund payments within a month. Anthropic has agreed in their settlement agreement to pay the full amount into the settlement fund in 4 installments: $300 million within a week of the preliminary approval, $300 million within a week of the court's final approval, $450 million within 12 months of the preliminary approval, qualified by its obtaining financing, and lastly, $450 million within 24 months of the preliminary approval. Unless Anthropic gets a certain level of funding before then, in which case it will pay right away. I don't know what kind of funding they're trying to raise, but I understand that if they get enough early enough, they'll pay early. So that was a lot, and it's pretty complicated, so stay tuned. It's developing, and I'll continue to update as we move forward. Beyond this settlement, where is all this stuff headed? With AI, the companies that have used authors' material to train their large language models, I wish I knew, but it seems likely that AI companies have found a way to train their AIs and not pay authors for the privilege. As I mentioned earlier, Google did this when they bought copies of books or maybe took them from libraries. I can't really remember all of the details, but they scanned them in, taking all the content, and then claimed fair use. And that has withstood, I think, many different lawsuits. And Anthropic argued that here, and they won kind of on those grounds. It seems like that's the world that we're going to be living in now. The books that are taken for AI and used, unless they are pirated, is fair game at this point. That doesn't mean they'll automatically win, but legal precedent is being set in these cases. Where AI-generated works are headed after this, I don't know that either. It depends on quite a few things, on public pressure or lack thereof, on further lawsuits, on future legislation. It depends on how good the technology gets as well. I'll be keeping an eye on this and other developments in the publishing world. I also have a ton more videos planned on writing and using Scrivener, so be sure to hit subscribe. And if you find this breakdown useful, please share far and wide. I hope to see you in the next one. Until then, dream big, stay positive, and keep writing. Peace, everyone.